In this video, I'm going to show you how to open G37 taillights. These have obviously already been modified, but that doesn't mean I can't show you how the cut is done. We have these in for a lens swap. The lenses that were on there were broken in the corners, so we took a brand new set and swapped them over. I'll actually link that video below. These taillights are plastic welded, which means we are going to have to cut, and these are the tools that we're going to need. Okay, so here are all the tools that we use to cut open the G37 taillights. Let's start with screwdrivers. So there are several screws on the back of the G37 tails that you will need to take off. They're Phillips heads, so you're gonna need a Phillips head screwdriver. The next screwdrivers are flat heads. Once you have it cut open a little bit, you need a very thin screwdriver to get inside that cut and twist to pop it loose. Then we have various bigger sizes so that we can speed up the process. Next up is the cutter itself. So we use the ultrasonic cutter. Look how thin this blade is. That is exactly why we use it. It makes a really, really small, thin cut on the lights, and it is not messy. But this is literally a $500 tool, and if you're not using it every day, then I don't suggest getting it. If you want something a lot more affordable and can be used with many different things, I suggest getting a Dremel. So we have just a regular Dremel 200. It's maybe like $100, and we got this extension. The reason I got the extension is because this base gets so hot that it's hard to hold. So with the extension, you can actually hold it a lot longer. The best bit for cutting open lights is the diamond bit, and that's because it's so thin. We are still going to use the ultrasonic cutter, but the cut is the exact same. But if you're using the Dremel, just know it's going to be really messy. Like, this is how we cut with the Dremel. It's pretty bad. Once you have opened up the taillights and done all of your modifications and you're ready to seal them up, you're going to need to use a hot knife so that you can plastic weld the taillights back. It's going to seal it up a little bit, but what it's mostly going to do is give it that structure again. If you don't plastic weld it back, then it can be easier for the lens to crack later on down the line, or worse than that, the lens could fall off while you're driving. This is the welder that we're using. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what brand this is. I actually found it at my old job and just kind of took it. Unfortunately, I don't know what brand it is. There is zero branding on it. After you've plastic welded, you do have to go over it with silicone. We like to use the black silicone, and try to make sure you always get silicone 2. It's the only one that doesn't shrink as much as the other ones. The combination of plastic welding and silicone is the best combination we found to not have any leaks and to keep the same structure as what it had before. So step one of opening up these taillights is to actually remove the screws that are on the back. We go ahead and remove the fin, and then every single screw that is holding the inner housing to the back housing. And if you still have it in place, you're actually going to remove the butt on the driver's side. The cut line on these is pretty easy, except for the driver's side. That button is a little bit tricky, but overall the cut line is pretty easy. You're just gonna follow the perimeter. The seal on this is actually pretty ugly. It's got two different seals on it, one from the original and one is ours. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at it. So as you can tell, they just cut right down in between the housing and the lens, all the way around, including all the way up through here. Now, the top is a little bit more tricky just because it does have that overlay, but you are literally just going to cut straight through there in order to get this back housing off. Okay, that's the easier part. The hardest part is going to be this button. This side, you cut in between the lens and the back housing and you're good to go. There's obviously no button there. The driver's side, yeah, we got this big old hole that is plastic welded just like the rest of it. So what we found is that you have to cut through the back of it. Obviously this cut is hideous. It's because it's so hard to get to. So we can get to it with the ultrasonic cutter. With a Dremel, it's gonna be extremely difficult. That's whenever I recommend using the hot knife. But it gets tricky with any sort of cutter that you're using because you can easily go straight through the back housing all the way through the front lens, and then you have a worthless front lens. I talked with another builder who says that he goes through the front so that he doesn't accidentally do that. But I can see that also causing some issues too, just because there's not a whole lot of plastic to actually cut on. My best piece of advice is to just take it slow. Don't be afraid to cut it 2 or 3 times, and really do not break or go through that front lens. Don't be afraid to try a couple of different methods. Just because this is the method that we've used does not mean that it's the right one. This is the very first set that we've ever opened, and we are going off of a set that was previously opened, so we had to match the cut almost exactly. Okay, after you have opened the lights and you've done all your modifications, now it's time to plastic weld the lights back. Plastic welding is going to be very similar to metal welding. You're just going to heat up the two pieces and they are going to melt together to create a stronger bond than weld being apart. It's not going to be as strong as OEM, but it is going to be stronger than just silicone. Now this bit is very time consuming. It takes us a while to get all the way around the whole thing, and you really don't want to hit the lens, so you got to be careful for that. Just try not to hit the lens. If you do, it's going to melt and you're going to be able to see it from the front, and that's not good. Now that you have plastic welded the entire light, you can now add your silicone. Now, my goal with silicone is to have it look extremely clean. Like this right here is a perfect example of a really clean swipe of the silicone all the way around. It looks like it should be there. This, on the other hand, isn't my favorite, but you can see we have several layers. We did try to remove the original layer. It was very stuck on there, so we couldn't quite get it off, but it's still watertight. We've already water leak tested it and everything, so it's gonna be okay. So if you can, try to get as smooth as this. I also recommend going back after a couple hours and doing at least a second or third layer of silicone so that you don't have any water leaks down the line. Once the back housing and the lens are completely sealed together, then we actually put in the screws on the back. The reason that we wait is so that the housing doesn't move inside there. We want the lens and the housing to go back into their natural position. If you bolt it up too early, we found that it can actually shift things and make the lights not fit 100% correct in the car itself. But you may have a different experience. If you want to bolt it up beforehand, you can. This is just the way that we do it. Once you have done all that, then you are done. I recommend water leak testing it. There's a couple different methods. You can do the old school, just spray some water on it, see if any water gets in. You can also tape off any holes that you have in the back here. So this hole, this hole, this hole, tape all of those off, and then poke a small hole and apply some pressurized air and spray some soapy water on the entire thing. If you have any soapy bubbles coming out from any of your seal or anywhere on the light itself, then you know that that's gonna leak in the future. Some tips that I can give that are not required, but that I think helps take the build to the next level is to have just some protection all the way around. These foam pieces you can get at Home Depot. You can also get cling wrap from any store. As you can see, we have cling wrap on all of the lights that we work on. That is just to protect the lens from getting any sort of micro scratches, and you can actually touch the lens without worrying about getting any scratches on it. Okay, bye.